Hey guys, I'm Matt Ferland here with Shooter's Choice and Otis Technology.
And I'm Greg Essenlohr.
Today we're going to talk about, in my corner, cables.
And in my corner, rods.
So we're talking rods versus cables. Let's get into it.
Let's get into it.
Yeah, I mean, we get a lot of questions in customer service and people just talking in general at shows and stuff and what they prefer. It seems like solid rods are always the bench shooter club, and some of the prior military guys, you know, snipers and special forces, things like that. It's always solid rod talk, and commercially you can kind of go with both. So we should talk a little bit about both of them and the pros and cons. So solid rod.
I think it's one of those things that's been around forever. Everything was solid rod related, you know. When I first started shooting, I found an old, I'm not going to mention the name of the kit, you know, in my father's gun cabinet, and that's where I started off with.
Crappy kit?
Crappy old kit,
Yeah, weird.
Yeah. You know, that's what I started off with, though. It's what I learned on. You know, it wasn't until, you know, actually coming here to Otis and using the cables. You know, you look at the solid rods, I mean, this is our solid rod, but, you know, they're big. They're cumbersome, but they do a nice job for, you know, field cleaning. Yeah,
I mean, most people working on a bench in their house, at the gun range, things like that, on a workbench, solid rod is just easy to go to, and they don't have to do much. They set them up, and usually you'll have 2 or 3 of them, and they just go and do what they need to do with them. You know, you do need jags, loops, and then, you know, where you can get away with just a loop on a cable or something is easier. But most guys use square patches. Like these here with jags on solid rods. So people can, historically, whatever they could get cloth, right? They cut t-shirts or whatever they could, they'd cut a square cloth and use that. And depending on what bore you were cleaning is how big of a patch you would make. So shotguns, they were making really big patches to try to get that to go out to your bore lining versus, you know, a 22, you could get with a 1/2-inch patch and get down there and clean with it. So you kind of had to know what you were doing with making patches to get them to work, and you didn't have a one-size-fits-all.
No, you knew if you made it too big.
Yeah, but the good news is even if you made it really big, with a solid rod, you can still drive them out. So that is an advantage to it.
I think, too, it's, you know, it's one of those things, again, it's a personal preference. How were you taught? What were you brought up on? Was it using solid rods? Was it using the newer cable system? You know, there's pros and cons to both.
Yeah.
One of my fondest memories was cleaning my father's 22 with a solid rod and having too big of a patch and then trying to force that down through the bore.
Did you get real nervous and sweaty? You were going to find out. You were trying to get it out with everything. Yeah. I tried a blowtorch on mine. It didn't work. I figured I'd burn it out, but that was a bad idea. Yeah, I mean, we've all probably been there at some point or another. It's funny, though. I know one thing with working with Otis for so many years, and traditionally, Otis is a cable system and a pull-through system from Breech-to-Muzzle. And then when we purchased Shooter's Choice and we started having rods available, it kind of felt dirty to me.
It felt very dirty.
I was like, oh, I don't. And for so many years, you were, you know, our sales and talking to people at shows and everything, you were explaining the differences and why it was better with a cable. And I guess, I mean, we could just lay it out. We fought that battle for so many years.
Correct.
And it was like, no matter what you scientifically or bro science or whatever you want to call certain things, you were just not going to change some people's idea. And they were taught this way from their grandfather and their father and their uncle, and this is the only way to do it. And, you know, you explain, I do this for a living, it's my job, I'm doing it every day, and I'm telling you that what they told you might not be 100% accurate, and it doesn't matter. And if, you know, I mean, I've had bench shooter guys are like the superstitious, well, I've got to turn this rod 3 times around, stand on 1 foot and then do it. But they're also the guys that are punching a 2-inch group at 1,000 yards or something ridiculous, and whatever they're doing works for them, that's what they're going to stay with. And so why fight the battle? And that's really the reason we offer both now. Is because there is a system that works for everyone, and they have to decide what they want. Or some people use both, and there's nothing wrong with that either. For pistols, you know, using a short rod is super easy. I mean, the barrels come off so easy, and you know, if you're going to pull it down like that and pull your slide off, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. And a lot of pistols come with like a loop brush with them already, which are great to use.
You look at some of the longer guns, though, you know, you talk about the cons of solid rods. You know, we've always preached from day one, you want to clean breech to muzzle so you get everything out of the end of the barrel.
Yeah.
That's fine with a bolt gun that you can take the bolt out, but you go to a lever action or some of these pumps and stuff, and you're not able to clean breech to muzzle easily.
Yeah, I mean, you can feed the rod down and then put your parts on and pull it back out, and you're essentially doing the same thing. But it's kind of a pain to thread it in there, get your hands in the chamber, don't fit, and what. So, then a cable is definitely a closed chamber type system or something is way easier to use. I always find it's. I don't know if people think cables don't clean as well. In their mind, they think that scrubbing action is what you're doing. If you're not going back and forth, you're not scrubbing, you're not getting it out, and it's like that's not what you're trying to do, and it's just hard for people to do that. I mean, we could talk about some of the cons with the size of a rod, and it's not portable, right?
Yep.
Sectional rods are more portable in a kit, but it's still bigger. I mean, you've got a cable system and something that size versus a whole kit. Sectionally, they're not as strong. I mean, if you bend them or something, really trying to force something, you can snap them easier.
You can snap them, you can lap the side of your bore, you can do a lot of things.
Yeah, I mean, we use brass on everything. We do have steel rods and coated rods also. We don't have aluminum rods. There's a reason for that. So if anyone's ever used like those aluminum, crossbars that they sharpen knives with, that's aluminum. You make aluminum oxide is rusting of aluminum, basically. It's oxidation. And you start rubbing that on knives, it's sharp. Well, you're doing the same thing on your crown, right? I mean, if you're reaming on your crown, it's not great. That's the last thing that touches the bullet. I mean, there's bore guides that help with that. But if you're not proficient using it or you forget it or something like that, you can damage your gun pretty easy if you're using a aluminum rod. So brass is softer.
Yep.
So that's why we use brass on those.
But the advantage of the cable too is if you don't want to break the firearm down at all, you want to clean it just breech to muzzle quickly, you can slide this in the action of a pistol or a rifle, lever action, that kind of thing. Pull it down to your job and keep moving on. So for field use, cable system is the way to go.
Oh yeah. So we did mention a couple of times with breech to muzzle. And so what we're talking about is the chamber area where your bullet sits, going out the end of your muzzle where your sight is, right? So the reason why that's important is because you're pulling everything out of the gun, not forcing it back in. So your chamber is where all the action's your engine, right? It's where everything happens in the gun mechanically, and then the bullet travels out. You don't want to force that fouling, copper, build up everything back into there because it just gums up the works. Yeah. So I always, you don't change your oil in your car and go in through the tailpipe. You don't force everything and clean it. Well, some of us
doing it wrong.
I know. Yeah. So you want to, clean it from the engine out, not push it back in there. So that's when we're talking breech to muzzle, just so everybody understands that with that part of it. And with that, like you're saying with the cable, you don't have to take your gun apart. You just open the action and feed it through. It's one directional each time, and you pull it through, and that works pretty well. So another, I don't call it a disadvantage, but you have jags that are certain size for specific guns, and that size has to be really appropriate for that bore, where most of the cable systems you have like two sizes, 22 size and a 30 cal size, and you can use those all the way through. So you have a lot more parts if you have an inclusive kit that you're doing everything with. And you've got to keep track of those. And then, it's very easily possible that you have a 45 jag on and you start cleaning, a 9mm, and you start reaming in there and realize, I have the wrong jag on.
It's a bad day.
It can happen.
Yeah.
Especially if some guy's cleaning after the range all night or something, they're having a few cocktails or whatever they're doing. They shouldn't be playing with firearms at that point, but it's tradition for some people at their hunting camp after a day. And,
tradition.
So that's one of those things that, you got to keep an eye on. So there are more parts involved in a solid rod, and you really should have a bore guide.
Yeah.
And that just stops it from rubbing on the rifle and going in and out. So the positives we kind of broke into a little bit on the cables. You don't have to disassemble your gun. I'll pull this one apart. I want to kind of show the difference with it. I want to talk about a patch, square patch on a jag. So it's a pierce point jag. And basically, that's all you're doing. You're pulling that in there. You push this through the bore. So what happens, I've got a round patch here, And I'm just going to put like a 30 cal tip on it. And basically, with the patches on the Otis kits, you can decide what size rifle you're doing, still using the same one, whether it's a 22 series, this is a 30 cal and up. So you're gonna pinch your patch, and there's a ton of videos we have on doing this, so I won't get into it too much. But here's the big difference, and I've talked about it with a lot of people. So with a solid rod, I'm gonna clean my bore. I'm gonna go from the backside. We're using a bolt action 700. Push through. This patch is getting folded back as it pushes through. Well, what you're doing with that patch is stretching it. When you stretch that material and pull on it, it's getting thinner in diameter. It's pushing against the jag, but it's actually getting thinner. So that is not as thick as when you pull a knot through, which is what we effectively make with this patch system on the cable. And when you pull on a knot, just like your sneakers or anything else, you pull that tight, it gets hard. Well, the only where that can pack into is in your lands and grooves. So that patch is getting harder in that bore and forcing itself to anywhere it can go, which is where you want lands and groove getting clean. So effectively, that system will clean better. Now, you do have to feed it through each time, and you can do these generally quicker and run a bunch through, pop that patch off, you run another one. So you're which do you want better? I had a bench shooter. I was like shocked this year. We were down in Franklin, Tennessee at an event, and this guy was a world record holder for, I think he had like less than a 1-inch group at 1,000. And I was like, well, what do you use for a cleaning system? Usually they're solid rod. He goes, I use your ripcord and cable. And I was like, really? And he goes, his biggest thing was letting the chemicals do the work.
Correct.
He said, I spray them in there, I let them sit for 5-10 minutes. He goes, and then pull it through there, and that's my system. And he has the medals and trophies to prove it works. So I think as long as people are doing something, some kind of system, it works. And that's, the most important. But I always found that very interesting. And when you talk to, in your world on the military side of the house, and you try to convince somebody that this patch cleans better than that, there's no way
We did it for a long time.
I know, you fight with them about it.
Eventually, the U.S. military adopted the cable system, but we fought a long time. And the sniper community is still mainly these, when it comes to that. And shop maintenance. Now, field maintenance is different because they're not carrying around big solid rods with them, but same thing. That's a good example, too. I did a range event up in Canada with one of our partners, and one of the firearm manufacturers had a failure on the line, stuck case. So I tried with the Otis system with the cable, and I sat there and I tapped it. Didn't work. Grabbed a solid rod, stuck it down the end of the barrel. We sat there and tapped it with a rock because we didn't have a hammer or anything. Finally, the guy grabs the whole rifle with the rod hanging out and slams it against the pavement. And it was the only way we could get that thing to. So yes, it broke the solid rods. It was ugly all the way around. But at that point, the solid rod, that was a pro. It worked for what it needed to. We had to buy new rods after that because they were bent and smashed. But
cheaper than a new barrel.
Yeah.
So just so everybody understands, you were talking about tapping with an Otis cable.
Yeah.
So it's a steel cable. This is like 750 pounds of pull, so it's not going to break.
Yep.
And when you're talking tapping with it, you feed this down the muzzle, and because it's in, say, a bore diameter of whatever.
Smaller the better.
Yeah. It becomes a solid rod because it's in that tube. And you can effectively get out mud or things like that, or I've even popped a wad and a shotgun out, just tapping at it. I mean, it's not it's not a big, you got to work it to do it, but you can do it.
It works very well.
To get it out. So that's a big, now, if it's a casing that's really expanded in there, or maybe that chamber's not honed correctly and that brass is just sucked right up into it and it's just holding, then you might have to go to a rod to do that.
A rubber mallet on the side of the charging handle.
Yeah. I mean, I bring all the tools with me when I go to events now. It's, it's always frustrating if something happens when you're at an event with your guns and, you're on the spotlight and you're trying to get them running and stuff. So I'm sure that guy was like appreciative that you had parts to use there, but he just wants it done and going. So that's, so there are certain things that solid rod you definitely do.
We did an M1 the other day, and they were running blanks in it for the honor guard.
So super dirty.
And it was super dirty. And we tried the cable, wouldn't touch it. Tried a rod, wouldn't touch it. Finally, I took the side of the charging handle up against a 4x4 pillar they had in the building and just slammed it. And it was the only way I could get that one out.
To break it loose.
To break it loose.
So how long had that gun sat for probably?
For a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it happens. I mean, ideally, the best prevention of any of that is cleaning it before you put it away.
Yeah.
And, treating it properly with a rust prevent or long-term storage. And then, you don't have to worry about it when you pick it up. But a lot of times people get back, they're done shooting, they throw it in the thing. And if you have a lot of guns, it happens where you're not planning on using that one again next week anyways. And you just go to the next one. And then 3 years later, you go, I want to pick that one. And it's like,
It's a mess.
yeah, that happens.
Kind of like my muzzle loader every year.
Yeah. Like, you don't touch it for 1 week a year. And then, why doesn't this thing run?
Oh, I never cleaned it after the last shot.
So muzzle loaders are funny because they've come so far with speed breaches, and one of the companies has an ignition system. It looks like a shotgun shell going in there now, and there's no breech plug at all. So there's different things, and those all open themselves now to using cable systems, where everything before was kind of you screwed a jag on your ramrod.
Yep.
And you were using that for your cleaning also. So not only did you load the gun with it, but you were cleaning with the same ramrod.
Yeah. Well, that's another spot that I'll say that I liked the solid rod better, because after I left my gun for a year, it was so pitted that I had to hook it to a power drill and just keep wadding the cleaner to it.
Where do we work?
To try to break up the rust. You shoot and then you reload.
Yeah.
You bring home your deer, and you forget that thing is dirty.
Yeah, that's...
That black powder is...
oh, it's so corrosive.
It's ugly.
I mean, it just bites into all the metal and everything. So ramrods definitely work well for that. And,
if you remember.
Their sizing is different too. So we should talk a little bit about thread size. We use 8/32 on all our Otis gear. We're using that on our rods too, but there's a lot of rods out there that use 10/32 or 8/36. There's other ones. So if you're buying a new kit, don't always assume that every brush you have prior.
Yeah.
And honestly, brushes are a disposable item. They're not meant to last for 50 years. You use them until they start getting beat up and you get a new one. It's just not going to work as effectively. And you can clean them and do stuff with them, but
Well, you talk about brush durability. The way that our system works, you're constantly pulling those bristles one direction.
Right.
You start running them into a solid rod, and you're going back and forth, and it just starts to break that tensile strength, and eventually the brush does wear out quicker.
Yeah, and the way that they're looped and twisted, especially with the nose, and you're making that filament go back and forth. You're loosening that bond, so now the filament starts shifting one side or the other, and it wears differently. And just breaking that bond, sometimes you push it down in something, and now you want to pull it back out, and you're like, Jesus, this is really, to get that to flip over, if you're using an oversized brush on the cable system, you generally can still pull them through.
Yep.
Because it's just like a Christmas tree going through the front door. The branches will fold up this way, you can pull it through. Pushing it back out this way, it just holds its own.
Correct.
So it's the same kind of principle with that. But the thread size is something for people to really look at and make sure. How many times have you had the same thing? Well, I don't need a new kit because I've got all this stuff in a tackle box from, 1930s from Montgomery Wards or something. And you're like, great. That's why they make eBay. You can sell all that stuff for $1 on there and then buy yourself a kit that is going to work and, treat your firearm that you pay good money for, treat it well, and it will last you and not have issues. And whether you're leaving them to somebody or it's a tool for you and you're going to beat on it, but you want it to work when you use it, that's,
At the end of the day, though, I think it's personal preference. You're trying to clean a weapon, a firearm.
Yeah.
If you're used to doing it with a solid rod, we offer that now too.
Yep.
If you want to use a cable, solid rods are great in a bench area, cables work there as well. But the cables also, you could roll them up, stick them in your little kit there.
They go in your pack.
And
I don't know how many
take them out in the field.
How many hunts I've been on out west where guys have something wrong and, tent camp or whatever, and they're in, uh-oh.
Yeah.
And you break it out and you've got some tools in there and they're like, oh man, let me try. And then by the time the end of the night, you're cleaning everybody's gun. You're like, is this why I'm on vacation?
Yeah.
This is not.
Well, $50 a rifle, it's fine now.
Yeah, it's funny when that happens though. And then everybody's like, I need one of those. So there is a place for both of them. I think if you have one to have, it's probably the cable system because you can use it everywhere.
Is that because they pay your paycheck?
Yeah. No, it makes sense. Yeah. If you can do both with one, well.
Yeah. The way our system works with the cable and our attachments, I think, is offers a superior cleaning solution compared to the solid rod systems.
We talked about basically cutting like a 5-inch patch for shotguns on a solid rod to get it to go through there. So we make a little bit bigger of a slotted tip for shotguns. And I don't know, I mean, the way this thing, that noise going through and you just know it's working. So you just take your patch and put it on there. You put this on, which is our patch saver, we call it. And then you pinch your patch and put it through. We make that a little bit wider so it's easier to do that. So now that rubber patch saver in there is forcing it out into the barrel. It's not squeegeeing, but it kind of is in effect.
Sounds like a squeegee.
Yeah, I mean, you pull that through, you're gonna put your solvent around there and pull it through the barrel. But that pushes all the way out and it's very consistent. It's the same. When you wad up 4 inches of patch in there, you could have a wrinkle in it that you're not getting any cleaning all the way down the barrel as you pull that through, and you're just leaving that in each time you're pulling it. So with this, it's 360 degrees, it's pulling through. Now, I have seen people put this system onto a rod at home and feed the rod down, screw it on, and pull it out if you had to, and that would work. But on the cable system, it's just for cleaning a shotgun, you know, especially like sporting clays or anything like that, or you're already bringing a range bag with you. You're going from station to station. You got all the shells with you. You throw this in there, and you can clean it out. And you know, if you're switching choke tubes between stations or something like that, you just basically clean those off with a patch and stuff too. So that's definitely one of the big advantages to that. But like I said, with a pistol, the little short rod is easy. I mean, we make cables this size for pistols too, but pulling a barrel off is so easy to do.
It is
Run
easy to
that
do.
through, and it just, I think it's ease of use at that point.
Correct.
Just not putting different attachments and going through and doing that. I don't know. I think personal preference for everybody is the way to go. I think we touched on a lot of different things and get people started on their cleaning journey with whether it's cables or rods. You probably need both.
It doesn't hurt to
Honestly,
have both.
You know, I mean, your kid's got to eat, so both is good.
Both is good.
I joke about it, but there is their place for each one of them.
Yep.
And, you know, maybe if it's your first kit and you're just getting into, you know, firearms and stuff, you go with a system like that where you can travel with it to the range. You can still do it at your house. And then when you get more refined and know exactly what you want, or you buy your first bench gun and you really want to fit in with that crowd and do those things, then you get a solid rod and do that. But,
I'm still personally cables and ripcords.
yeah,
Cables for a deep clean, ripcords for the in-between.
for the range.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, that's duck hunting, whatever. And
Yeah.
you pull a ripcord through and you're still going. So I think that hopefully will help a lot of people.
Yeah. If you guys have any comments or anything on our video, anything like you'd like us to touch on, please comment below.
If you like the video, click like.
Yeah, that helps too.
And check out our other videos we've done, and hopefully we helped you out today. Till next time, I'm Matt.
I'm Greg.